Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Piers Morgan and Conan O'Brien.
Hello. Wow, I haven't seen, actually, I haven't had an audience that big for quite a while. Nice to see you. Now, Conan.
No, I just want to feed off their energy
Go
for
on,
a
let's
second.
suck it in a bit.
This is fantastic. Thank you for awakening me. Everyone settle down. We got to get through this. Take your seats. Try and relax. Now, you had questions for me, Piers, I understand.
I don't need to. You can just do a monologue.
All right. I'll just talk for a while. I'm from Brookline, Mass. You got any Brookline in the house? That really didn't go anywhere. All right.
Let's get back to the question, shall we?
Yeah.
So I was told I've got to stick rigidly to the theme of the convention. We'll see about all cable, digital, broadband.
Right.
And I thought, sod that for a game of soldiers. So, Conan, how many times have you been properly in love?
It's interesting you ask. I would say over 9 times in my life.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah. 9
Wow.
times deeply, passionately in love.
No one's ever come up with such a large number.
I just made that up. I have no idea. I'm so repressed and out of touch with my real feelings that I have no idea what you're talking about.
Let's get
I
to
don't
something.
love anyone.
Really?
No, I'm
not
just
even, not even yourself?
No. Oh. Different matter, Piers.
Let's turn to something a little more relevant and possibly less contentious. You currently have 5.6 million followers on Twitter, and Jay Leno has 376,000.
Right. Yeah.
Thoughts?
He's busy. He's got the largest private car collection in the world, so he doesn't have time for social media. But
your show has 1.86 million likes on Facebook, and Jay Leno's has 429,000.
right.
Are you seeing a pattern here?
I am. He has 2 people on MySpace also. She's very proud of. One of them's a pedophile. I think the crowd's waking up now.
It is early for
yeah.
a media crowd. Your Twitter feed is fascinating because quite a lot of it is relevant to this kind of audience. I picked out 3 I particularly like. Today, Facebook went public just as MySpace's last user went private.
Yes, yeah. We have little quips here and there.
This one amused me. Just heard someone logging on to AOL. Instead of "you've got mail," the voice now says, "Greetings, old fool."
Yeah.
And just cancelled my Netflix subscription. Their Laserdisc collection is pitiful.
Yes, yeah. No, we have, I went through a profound experience about 2.5 years ago. I got started in 1993, obviously. I had worked in television before, but that's when I started my late night show. And it was a completely different era. It was basically still the dominance of the networks, and the network upfronts were a completely different situation than they are now. And television was all completely just about how many viewers do you have. And the fascinating thing I went through is whatever happened to me in 2010 it was a fascinating experience. I felt like I was standing with one foot in traditional broadcasting and one foot in this new world that we're all trying to figure out. And the divide ran right between me, and I had to make a jump one way or the other. And the last 1.5 years has been myself and my team trying to figure out what is this new world we're in, and how do we exploit it?
What's extraordinary, I think, about the transformation you've made is, you were described to me by someone at Time Warner as one of the most innovative of the talents they have in terms of what you've done with social media digital strategy. And when I actually looked into what you have done with Team Coco, you app, you tweet. Yes, why not? Team Coco. A round of applause for Team Coco.
That's just sad.
It was, wasn't it, really? You app, you tweet, you Facebook, you Foursquare, you put videos on YouTube, you webcast, you Flickr, you Tumblr. You're the Kim Kardashian of late night, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
But it's an amazing panoply of stuff that you do.
Yeah.
Tell me about the overall strategy here.
The overall strategy, first of all, is I never pretended to know anything about any of this. I was a Luddite a few years ago. When I was at NBC, we had a late night page, but it was the same website page that a dry cleaner would have. I mean, it really was just, you click on it, there's a picture of me, it has the week's guests, and how you can get tickets, and that was it. And there was, I think, a little bit of a condescending attitude for a long time about the web, which is it's cute, it's fun, the media likes to talk about it, but it's of no consequence. And clearly that's changing. It's changing really quickly. We have an amazing web team that's been extremely aggressive. And what we did is the whole experience I went through with The Tonight Show, we saw this grassroots movement that just sprung up, which I didn't even, frankly, know existed. When you're doing your show night after night, year after year, occasionally you travel the show and you see this kind of hysteria, but we didn't know. And so these people sprung up, they're very young, they're very smart about technology, they're using the internet, and they're fans of ours. So then I was forced to embrace this world and figure out how to use it. And the first thing I found was it's all about content. People constantly try and overthink the web, and I think funny content is funny content.
I mean, do you actually spend more time now doing stuff yourself for web-related offshoots of the show than for the show itself?
No, the show, I would still say, gets most of the focus, but you'd be shocked at how much focus now you have to put into making sure that, for example, Tracy Morgan was on my show last night. God help us all. And, and we...
Listen, I had Greg Allman. Try that one.
I had him 2 weeks ago.
He didn't remember.
No, he didn't remember. It's all a blur for poor Greg. He thinks we're still interviewing him.
He thinks he's still in the Rolling Stones.
Yeah, exactly.
It was a long night for those who didn't see it.
So the point is that I did a thing with Tracy Morgan and an interview with Tracy Morgan, and beforehand I go into his room and we work out a picture that we can put on Twitter, and it's Tracy and I arguing vehemently and yelling at each other. And then I tweeted that he and I were screaming at each other over whether or not Greece's gross national product should be used to determine the value of the euro in that country, the amount of the debt. And we send that out. And what you're doing with social media is constantly trying to figure out ways to create a symbiotic relationship. It's not just driving people on social network to your television show. Yes, you want to do that.
I mean, having said
but
that,
you want to get people on the TV getting emotionally involved in what you're doing.
That is
on
true, but I mean,
Facebook and Twitter.
I can tell you one story that when I booked Charlie Sheen at the height of his madness, and you remember everyone was trying to get him, and he'd done an interview, I think, for ABC, which he didn't like, and it was due to air the next evening.
Right.
So I rang him, and I got through to his mansion, where one of the two goddesses answered the phone. I never found out which one it was, but it was a very pleasing conversation.
We need to know exactly which one.
I've got a feeling it was the adult industry member of the goddess community. And she got Charlie on the phone. I persuaded him to come on the show, and I said, look, you will turn up, because obviously reliability wasn't his byword at the time. And at 5 minutes to 6 in LA, but just 5 minutes before we go live, there's no sign of him. So I'm made up, I've got the microphone, there's no plan B, and I'm thinking, right. And then this Maybach car swept in. Mm-hmm. And I hadn't been able to promote this show until he turned up, because I thought, if he doesn't turn up, we have no show. So it was 5 minutes to promote it. And I put one tweet up, and it just said, breaking news, schedule update, Charlie Sheen, going live right now, anything could happen. At which point he got out of the car and went, stop panicking, man, let's go rock and roll. Yeah. Which he did brilliantly for an hour. When we got the ratings back, 500,000 more people tuned in between 5:55 and 6 p.m. based on the one tweet.
Right.
It literally went like that in the Twitter sphere.
Well,
I thought that was fascinating.
We had an experience that I think illustrates a lot of what people here are rightly concerned about, trying to figure out, which is about a month ago, Will Ferrell called me up, and he said, I want to announce that we're going to make a new Ron Burgundy, Anchorman, and I'd love to do it on your show. And I said, that's fantastic. And he said, I'd like it to be a complete surprise. So he said, great. So Will Ferrell showed up. He made himself up with his team. He got made up as Ron Burgundy. And then we worked it all out, but he interrupted my show as Ron Burgundy. And the place went crazy. I mean, the audience is completely surprised. And he proceeds to announce the new anchorman and then play the flute and exit. And we have a great, as I said, a very aggressive team. What they did is they chopped his appearance up, they chopped things up into small bite-sized pieces, and they know exactly how to get it out there so that it's everywhere. Now, when I got started in the business in '93, the obsession was never give anything away. Don't tell anybody. Don't surprise them. You want it to be a surprise when they watch the show. You want to tease them, but get them to watch the show. And what we have found out is true is that this is a different generation. It works differently now. You can show them exactly what Will Ferrell did on the show and get it out there. So there's no surprise. But what happens is it goes everywhere, and then it turns around and created a wave of viewership for us that drove the more traditional viewing numbers at 11 o'clock at night. So what happened was we had incredible awareness. It was the thing everybody was talking about on the web. It increased our viewership for that night. It also, in my opinion, the more that you can do this, the more you can get both these pistons working, the more you can create a world where people are experiencing the show at 11, some. Others are experiencing it on their DVR a few days later. Others are experiencing it on little pieces that they saw, Huffington Post, Vulture, whatever, some site that they like. And eventually, what happens is they start to say, you know what, it's 5 minutes of 11. I'm going to check out Conan. It becomes more familiar to them. And they might watch that broadcast. And over time, I think what you have to do is the days of, I only want people to experience me at 11 o'clock, on TBS, those days are over. You have to, the audience is too fractured, they're too distracted, and a whole generation is growing up that doesn't watch television that way.
How much more freedom do you have working now in cable than you did on network broadcast?
Well, what's great, and I'm not just saying this because they bought me breakfast this morning, but Turner has been absolutely a dream come true. We're a perfect fit because they're very smart. They're up for anything we're up for, and they are agile. When I mean agile is, I feel like in the days when I was on network, I used to tell my writers, we're a tiny little comedy club on a giant cruise ship. And the ship takes big, long, slow turns, and we have about that much control over what happens, over our destiny. What has happened with Turner is that we'll have an idea, we'll call them up, and they'll say, that sounds great, can you do it tomorrow? We're behind you. Things happen quickly. There's a focus, and there's also, I always think about Walt Disney. Walt Disney never met a technology that he was afraid of in his entire career. He starts out as a cartoonist, then someone comes along and says, we just figured out how to animate these. He said, I'm in. I love this. Let's do it. Then someone said, we can put sound on these. Let's do it. Then someone said, we can actually make these into feature-length films. Let's do it. Someone just had an idea that you could possibly make a theme park. I'm in. We could actually put this on television. Where do we do it? He always embraced technology. He always embraced the next thing. And I believe that my attitude the last couple of years was adapt or die. I'm either going to, I was for 6.5 or 7 months sitting behind the desk of one of the most iconic brands in old traditional network television, and then suddenly found myself having to make a choice, and I chose, I think this is where it's going. And the last 1.5 years has just been a complete, for me anyway, affirmation that that's the way to go. That this is going to be, I look at the way we employ a lot of young people, I look at the way they experience television. It's not the way that I watch television even, it's not the way that my parents would ever have watched television. It's a new world, and so embrace it.
Do you care? If you look at this room in particular.
I can't see anybody. The faces are obscured.
I didn't mean you care about them. I
don't even know if there are people here, frankly.
Do you care how they watch your show?
No.
I mean, there are iPads, there are Blackberries, there are laptops and everything. There are a multitude of ways that this audience in particular will watch television. Does it bother you?
Not in the least.
You have
If
no
you're-
old-fashioned
No,
sense
if
of
you know,
television is best.
It's funny because we all have. I'm sure a lot of people in this room watched we were talking about it backstage, the Carson documentary that just aired, and I was fortunate enough to know Johnny Carson a little bit and get to talk to him, and even get to talk to him about the Tonight Show when he found out that I would eventually be taking that challenge on. And so I had this unique experience of being able to talk to the guy who was probably the last person to experience that kind of television. All of America watched everything that he did every night, and he was genius. That is not the case today. That's not the way it is. So if you think about Johnny Carson's iconic throwing of the tomahawk, and it hits the crotch of the cutout dummy, the Ed Ames tomahawk toss, was this iconic TV moment that you used to wait every year for Johnny's anniversary special to see it, because that was the only way you could see it. Today, people would be experiencing it on YouTube, or people would be turning it into ringtones. Things are experienced differently. As a comedian, as someone who grew up not getting enough attention and having huge issues with his parents, that I've come home to Boston to work out with you, which is incredibly sad. I like it when people come up to me and say, I saw you do that thing, and it really made me laugh. I don't care if it was a saline solution they put in their eye, which is, well, probably they're going to announce that's television in 5 years. I don't know. The technology is going to change. To me, it's about how do they experience me being honest and trying to practice whatever craft I have and trying to make something funny. We talked backstage about my favorite example in broadcasting is when the Beatles went on Ed Sullivan, 90 million people tuned in to watch them. And I have always said, yes, the Beatles were great, but if the same phenomenon of the Beatles, 4 guys from Liverpool, happened today, by the time they showed up at Ed Sullivan, we'd all be sick of them. We'd have watched their videos of them in the Cavern Club on YouTube that have made 600,000 home movies of them playing in skiffle groups. We'd be like, yeah, those guys. That's the world that we're in today.
I thought you said an interesting thing about that too, that of that 90 million, how many tuned in just to see what they look like?
Yeah, exactly. I was saying that people back then, there's so many people that weren't tuning in because they loved the music. They heard a lot about these guys with weird haircuts, so they were tuning in with their kids to see what they looked like. Now, can you imagine today, by the time you actually get to the TV and turn it on, you've been bombarded with 900,000 images of this person and pieces of video. And so the very nature of entertainment has changed. My focus is always make it funny, create a real funny moment, try and make something memorable, push harder and harder and harder to have the content be good.
Now, it's interesting you say that, because talking of content, I discovered last night the script for your commencement speech at Harvard, which you attended, and you made the speech in 2000. And I thought it might be just appropriate to end with your previous thoughts in Boston.
I have no memory of this, but
that's what's going to make
I'm
this
afraid of what's
so
going to happen.
One of your opening lines
I promise I'll be with NBC for the rest of my life.
It did say, I want to kill Jay Leno.
Oh, come on.
You hadn't even met him.
He's a wonderful man. Wonderful man.
Here was one of the lines. I especially...
Wonderful fellow. True humanitarian.
One of your lines was, I especially miss Harvard Square. And let me tell you, you don't know this, Harvard Square is unique. Nowhere else in the world will you find a man wearing a turban and a Red Sox jacket working in a lesbian bookstore.
True.
I'm just glad my dad's working.
Yeah.
You went on. This is, again, very timely. I thought it was for the records, so I jogged in the August heat to a passport photo office and sat for a morgue shot. To make matters work, when the Facebook came out, they put my picture right next to Catherine Oxenberg, a stunning blonde actress who was expected to join the class of '85, but decided to defer admission so she could join the cast of Dynasty.
That's true. She was in my freshman Facebook next to me. The worst photo of me ever taken, and they put Catherine Oxenberg from Dynasty next to her.
Your final line on this was, folks, my photo would have looked bad on any page, but next to Catherine Oxenberg, I looked like a mackerel that had been in a car accident. And then this takes a little bit of time. This is one of the greatest commencement ending moments of a speech I've ever read. I found it last night incredibly inspiring. So I hope you just bear with me for like a minute to read this, because it's genius, prescient, and I think for all of us in this room and in the media, incredibly appropriate. He ended it by saying, I've had a lot of success. I've had a lot of failure. I've looked good. I've looked bad. I've been praised. I've been criticized. But my mistakes have been necessary. I've dwelled on my failures today because as graduates of Harvard, your biggest liability is your need to succeed. Your need to always find yourself on the sweet side of the bell curve. Success is a lot like a bright white tuxedo. You feel terrific when you get it, but then you're desperately afraid of getting it dirty, of spoiling it. I left the cocoon of Harvard. I left the cocoon of Saturday Night Live. I left the cocoon of The Simpsons. And each time it was bruising and tumultuous, and yet every failure was freeing. And today I'm as nostalgic for the bad as I am for the good. So that's what I wish for all of you, the bad as well as the good. Fall down, make a mess, break something occasionally. Know that your mistakes are your own unique way of getting to where you need to be. And remember, the story is never over. If you'll indulge me for just a second, I'd like to read a little something from just this year. Quotes, somehow Conan O'Brien has transformed himself into the brightest star in the late-night firmament. His comedy is the gold standard. Conan himself is not only the quickest and most inventive wit of his generation, but quite possibly the greatest host ever. He paused. Ladies and gentlemen, class of 2000, I wrote that myself this morning. As proof that when all else fails, you will always have delusion. I will go on now to make bigger mistakes and to embarrass this fine institution even more, but let me leave you with one last thought. If you can laugh at yourself, loud and hard, every time you fall, people will think you're drunk. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Great
that was
to see you.
fun.
Thank you very much.
That's it.